Namaste Saraswate Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashatya Deshatarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauratushe Namaha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Tarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so last time we had discussed the 5 potent forms of devotional service. So now we'll proceed ahead with chapter 14, Devotional Qualifications. Okay, somebody can read the first 3 paragraphs from the book.
Hare Krishna, Lilananda.
Right.
Devotional qualifications. Some scholars recommend that knowledge and renunciation are important factors for elevating oneself to devotional service. But actually, that is not a fact. Actually, the cultivation of knowledge or renunciation, which are favorable for achieving a footing in Krishna consciousness, may be accepted in the beginning, but ultimately they may also come to be rejected. For devotional service is dependent on nothing other than the sentiment or desire for such service. It requires nothing more than sincerity. It is the opinion of expert devotees that mental speculation and the artificial austerities of yoga practice may be favorable for becoming liberated from mental contamination, but they will also make one's heart harder and harder. They will not keep at all in the progress of devotional service. These processes are therefore not favorable for entering into the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Actually, Krishna consciousness devotional service itself is the only way of advancing in devotional life. Devotional service is absolute. It is both the cause and the effect. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause and the effect of all that be, and to approach Him, the absolute, the process of devotional service, which is also absolute, has to be adopted. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita by the Lord Himself. One can understand me only through devotional service. In the beginning of His teaching of Gita, the Lord said to Arjuna, because you are my devotee, I shall teach these secrets to you. Vedic knowledge means ultimately to understand the Supreme Lord, and the process of entering into His kingdom is devotional service. That is accepted by all authentic scriptures. Mental speculators neglect the process of devotional service, and by simply trying to defeat others in philosophical research, they fail to develop the ecstasy of devotion.
Okay, read one more paragraph.
In the 11th canto, 20th chapter, verse 31 of Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna says, my dear Uddhava, for persons who are seriously engaged in my service, the cultivation of philosophical speculation and artificial renunciation are not very favorable. When a person becomes my devotee, he automatically attains the fruits of renunciation of material enjoyment, and he gets sufficient knowledge to understand the absolute truth. That is the test of advancement in devotional service. A devotee cannot be in darkness because the Lord shows him special favor and enlightens him from within.
Okay, fine. So here, Rupa Goswami is describing that what is the qualification to develop bhakti? So he's saying that the cultivation of knowledge or renunciation may be accepted in the beginning, but ultimately they may also come to be rejected. For devotional service is dependent on nothing other than the sentiment or desire for such service. It requires nothing more than sincerity. So that's the only qualification required to begin devotional service, to practice devotional service. Devotional service, as we discussed right in the beginning, we had discussed that how does devotional service begin? Somebody can say. We had discussed in the beginning.
Doing some services in the temple or the devotee.
Okay, that's true. So how does one get service?
worshipping the deities, worshipping the
No, that is a service. How does one get the service?
Somebody sees somebody else doing that and gets enthusiastic to do it.
Desire should be there, Prabhuji.
Desire.
Okay.
Mercy of spiritual master and Krishna.
Okay, so it's the causeless mercy of a devotee. That is how the devotional service begins. It's the causeless mercy of a devotee that one is engaged in devotional service. So therefore, that is the only cause for bhakti. There is no other cause. The cause for bhakti is bhakta or bhakti itself. So there's no other cause. So therefore, jnana and vairagya, knowledge and renunciation, cannot be the causes for bhakti. So therefore, the only cause for bhakti is the desire for such service. And then, of course, the causeless mercy of a devotee. And then in order to continue devotional service, the sincerity is required. That's all. So now he's explaining that it is opinion of expert devotees that mental speculation and the artificial austerities of yoga practice may be favorable for becoming liberated from material contamination, but they will also make one's heart harder and harder. So, Gyan and Vairagya, so here the question is being asked, why the process of Gyan and Vairagya unfavorable to devotional service? Okay, read from the screen.
Prabhuji's screen has to be updated. We don't see that.
Okay.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Read.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Attachment to Jnana and Vairagya. Jnana and Vairagya may be determinantal to the cultivation of devotion. Srila Rupa Goswami warns that Jnana and Vairagya can make the heart hard. A materially attached person has many emotions that impel him towards sense gratifications. Vairagya involves making the heart callous and callous and indifferent to these emotions so that one will not be moved by them. Bhakti though means to please the Lord by one's love for him. To express such love requires a soft heart, easily moved by the Lord's name, form, qualities, and activities. Jnana and Vairagya are not favorable to devotional service because they result in a hard, stoic heart.
So explaining that Jnana and Vairagya make the heart hard. So this, what type of Jnana and Vairagya? So this is the dry renunciation of the Jnanis and the Yogis, which is, so the Jnana is basically the Jnana in the mode of goodness. That is understanding that I'm not the body, I'm the spirit soul. That type, or the Jnana which leads to, that's the impersonal knowledge of the Supreme Brahman that leads to liberation. So that type of Jnana and Vairagya, that makes the heart hard. And so for bhakti means we are expressing our emotions of love towards the Lord. So therefore that requires a soft heart. And therefore it's said that Jnana and Vairagya are not favorable to devotional service because they result in a hard heart. Okay, somebody else read.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes.
Yeah. Attachment to Jnana and Vairagya. Translation. Because Jnana and Vairagya generally make the heart harsh. The authoritative devotees have concluded that bhakti alone, whose nature is very tender, is the cause of entering into bhakti. Bhakti Rasamrita 1-249. Jiva Goswami's commentary. This verse speaks of another fault in being attached to Jnana and Vairagya. They cause hardness in the heart. In Jnana, one must deliberate on the truth by defeating a variety of other philosophies. And in Vairagya, one must renounce enjoyment by repeated toleration of suffering. The very nature of these practices is harsh or unpleasant, and thus the heart becomes similarly harsh. This is the opposite of sweetness and softness of the heart. But how can a person enter into higher and higher stages of bhakti without some sort of assistance? The answer is given. Bhakti is said to be the cause of entering bhakti, and the previous acts of bhakti alone are the cause of entering into higher stages of bhakti. Yeah, but bhakti also will become a cause of hardening of the heart, since perfection can be reached only by effort. The answer is given. This bhakti, by its very nature, is extremely tender because it consists solely of thinking of the Lord's sweet form, qualities, and pastimes. Therefore, the conclusion is that bhakti should be performed with the desire make the heart melt in relation to the Lord. Prahlad Maharaj says, therefore, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, the best of all persons to whom prayers are offered, without rendering 6 kinds of devotional service unto you, offering obeisances to you, prayers, menial service, deity worship, remembering your pastimes, and hearing about your glories, who can achieve devotion to you, the goal of the Paramahamsas. This B 7950. Without these 6 types of service, some say vaya vina iti. How can a person attain bhakti? Vairagya and jnana are not mentioned at all in this statement.
Okay, so the nature of bhakti is extremely soft because of thinking of the Lord's form, qualities, pastimes. And so therefore, if one is actually practicing bhakti, then the heart naturally becomes soft. So what is being spoken of here is the jnana and vairagya, which is not connected to bhakti. So when the jnana and vairagya is not connected to bhakti, so it's when it's performed by the jnanis and the yogis, then that makes the heart hard. But if it is connected to bhakti, then the heart becomes soft. So here the question is raised, are the qualities of jnana and vairagya favorable to devotional service? Why or why not? So the qualities of jnana, knowledge, jnana, and detachment, vairagya are necessary for devotional advancement. Without knowledge and detachment, one will be attached to material body and tend to act for the body, not for Krishna's pleasure. Okay, so jnana and vairagya are definitely essential even for advancement on the devotional path. Otherwise, without that vairagya, one will simply be attached to sense gratification. So in fact, that's what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has come to teach, Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga. So Vairagya Vidya. So definitely Vairagya is required for practice of bhakti also. So then the next question is, how can one develop jnana and vairagya that's favorable to devotional service? So as we just read, even in this quote of the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam also is mentioned, and this is a quote from the first canto. So Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janyatyashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayada Hetukam. By rendering devotional service under the personality of God Shri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. Therefore, you can see Srila Prabhupada after this 11th canto quote, which is mentioning the same thing. When a person becomes my devotee, that means Krishna himself was speaking to Uddhav, he automatically attains the fruits of the renunciation of material enjoyment, and he gets sufficient knowledge to understand the absolute truth. That is the test of advancement in devotional service. Devotee cannot be in darkness because the Lord shows him special favor and enlightens him from within. So jnana and vairagya actually become the byproducts of bhakti. They're the effects of bhakti. So they're not the causes of bhakti, rather the effects of bhakti. And so a devotee automatically gets jnana, as we know the famous verses from the Bhagavad Gita. Tesham satyuktanam bhajatam priti purukam dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam yanti te. And the next verse, Tesham evanukam partam aham agyana jam tamha nashyami atmabhavastu jnana deepena bhasvata. So that's how a devotee can never be in darkness and ignorance, because the Lord himself gives knowledge. And then when the Lord gives knowledge, that means actually the Lord gives his own realization to the devotee. then obviously the devotee gets detached from everything material. So that's about Gyan. Regarding Vairagya, so the Vairagya that is favorable for devotional services, Yukta Vairagya. Anasaktasya Vishayan Yatharam Upayunjata Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yuktam Vairagyam Uchate. The Vairagya of that person who employs objects suitable for devotional development while remaining detached from them is said to be suitable for bhakti. The object should be persistently related to Krishna. So Yukta Vairagya means, first of all, there's Anasakti. There's detachment from the Vishayan, from the material sense objects. So one is detached from them, but at the same time one understands Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhi, that everything is related to Krishna. And so by understanding that everything is related to Krishna, then Yatharam Upayunjataha. So Yatharam means according to suitability. One engages them in Krishna's service, understanding the relationship to Krishna. So for oneself, one is detached. So one does not use them for one's own sense enjoyment, but understanding their relationship to Krishna, one uses all of them in Krishna's service. So that is Yukta Vairagya. And in contrast, there is Falgu Vairagya. Prapanchikataya buddhya hari sambandhi vastunaha mumukshvi parityago vairagyam falgu katyate. Rejection of things related to the Lord by persons desiring liberation, who think that these things are simply material objects, is called as useless Vairagya. So, Falgu Vairagya means that Prapanchikataya buddhya. So, one thinks that all the material objects of the world are material. One has a material perception. So, the mumukshubi, that means basically the jnanis who desire liberation, they think that all the material objects, they'll be the cause of bondage. Why? Because they cannot see the relationship with Krishna. Hari Sambandhi Vastunaha. So they're all related to the Supreme Lord, but they cannot see that relationship. And so because they cannot see that relationship, they consider them to be material and a source of bondage. So the philosophy of the Jnanis is Brahma Satyam, Jagan Mithya. So they think that this material world, material objects, everything is mithya, everything is false, and therefore will be a cause of bondage. And so therefore they reject them. Mumukshubi parityago. They reject them, consider them to be material, even though they're related to Krishna. Therefore it is called as false renunciation. So Srila Prabhupada explains in his lectures that Falgu. So there is a Falgu river in Gaya. And so it basically appears that there is no water in the river, there's only sand. But if one just removes a little bit of sand, there is water underneath. So it appears as if there's no water, but actually there's water. Similarly, it appears as if there is renunciation, but actually there's no renunciation. So therefore it is called as Falgu Vairagya.
Prabhuji, I have one question here.
Okay, so now we'll read from the book.
Prabhuji, I have one question.
Hare Krishna, everyone needs to be muted, it looks like. Whoever is the host.
Prabhuji, I have one question.
First, I think so we will read from the book and then you can ask your question.
Okay, Prabhuji.
Okay, so you can read maybe. So you can see that actually a person who's developing Krishna consciousness.
Yeah. Actually, a person who is developing Krishna consciousness and still has some attachment to material enjoyment will soon be freed from such a tendency by regularly discharging devotional service under the instruction of a bona fide spiritual master. Srila Rupa Goswami then recommends that one should not be attached to material sense enjoyment, but should accept everything enjoyable which is in relationship to Krishna. For example, eating is necessary and one wants some palatable dishes to satisfy his sense of taste. So in that case, for the satisfaction of Krishna, offered to Krishna, one should not accept them for eating. This vow of rejecting anything which is not offered to Krishna is actually renunciation. And by such renunciation, one is able to satisfy the demands of the senses. The impersonalists who try to avoid everything material may undergo severe austerities, but they miss the opportunity of being engaged in the service of the Lord. Thus, their renunciation is not sufficient for perfection. There are many instances where following such artificial renunciation without any contact with devotional service, the impersonalist again fell down and became attracted to material contamination. There are many supposed renouncers, even at the present moment, who officially become sannyasis or renouncers and outwardly claim that spiritual existence is truth and material existence untruth. In this way, artificially, they make a show of renunciation of the material world. However, because they cannot reach the point of a devotional service, they fail to achieve the goal and they again come back to material activities such as philanthropic work and political agitation. There are many examples of so-called sannyasis who gave up the world as untruth, but again came to the material world because they were not seeking their real repose at the lotus feet of the Lord. One should not give up anything which can be utilized in the service of the Lord. That is a secret of devotional service. Anything that can be utilized in advancing Krishna consciousness and devotional service should be accepted. For instance, we are using many machines for the advancement of our present Krishna consciousness movement. Machines like typewriters, dictating machines, tape recorders, microphones, and airplanes. Sometimes people ask us, why are you utilizing material products if you condemn the advancement of material civilization? But actually, we do not condemn. We simply ask people to do whatever they are doing in Krishna consciousness. This is the same principle on which in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna advised Arjuna to utilize his fighting abilities in devotional service. Similarly, we are utilizing these machines for Krishna's service with such sentiment for Krishna or Krishna consciousness, we can accept everything. If the typewriter can be utilized for advancing our Krishna consciousness movement, we must accept it. Similarly, the dictating machine or any other machine must be used. Our vision is that Krishna is everything. Krishna is the cause and effect, and nothing belongs to us. Krishna's things must be used in the service of Krishna. That is our vision. This does not mean, however, that we should give up the principles of discharging devotional service or neglect abiding by the rules and regulations prescribed therein. In the neophyte stage of devotion, one must follow all the principles regulated by the authority of the spiritual master. The acceptance and rejection of things should always be in pursuance of the devotional principles, not that one can independently manufacture some idea of what should be accepted or rejected. The spiritual master, as the visible manifestation of Krishna, is necessary, therefore, to direct the devotees on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Okay. So here, Srila Prabhupada is explaining that how the Mayavadi sannyasis, they follow this Falgu Vairagya, Brahma Satyam, Jagan Mithya. Okay, so spiritual existence is truth, material existence is untruth. But because they don't take shelter of Krishna, they don't have some higher taste and devotional service, therefore such sannyasis, even though they say that the material world is false, they come to enjoy this false material world and they perform philanthropic activity and other social welfare activities. So therefore, that Falgu Vairagya cannot last, because it is not based on truth. It is not based in connection with the supreme law. So therefore, one should practice Yukta Vairagya. But at the same time, Rupa Goswami is giving a warning over here that this does not mean, however, that we should give up the principles of discharging devotional service or neglect abiding by the rules and regulations prescribed therein. So everything is connected to Krishna, and everything can be used in Krishna's service. But at the same time, one must take into consideration the rules and regulations of devotional service. So just like if we say everything is related to Krishna, everything can be used in Krishna's service, then somebody may say that even intoxicants are also given by Krishna. Ultimately, they are also coming from Krishna only. Meat is also coming from Krishna only. So why not use them in Krishna's service? So therefore, everything has to be seen in light of the Paribhasha Sutra. That is Anya Bilashata Shunyam Gyan Karma Dhyanavritam Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam. So therefore, that has to be taken into consideration. It has to be Anukul. So Anukul means it has to be according to what Krishna likes and what will please Krishna. And the other thing is Anushilanam. Anu means following the predecessor acharyas. So therefore, we cannot concoct as to what can be used in Krishna's service and what cannot be used. Everything has to be in accordance to what the acharyas have said and what will ultimately please Krishna. So therefore, one cannot whimsically accept anything and everything and use in Krishna's service. So it has to be in accordance to the principles laid down by the acharyas. So in this connection, there is this interesting story that you may have heard, which Srila Prabhupada tells in the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 8th chapter, verse number 27, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So there he tells the story of the person, he was worshipping Lord Shiva. And then he asks Lord Shiva to give him what is most valuable. And then Lord Shiva sends him to Sanatana Goswami. And then he asks Sanatana Goswami, so please give me what is most valuable. And then Sanatana Goswami tells that, okay, I have this touchstone, Parasmani, you can take it. So where is it? Okay, it is in the dustbin. So he goes to the dustbin, he takes the Parasmani, and as he's going home, then he's thinking that if this is the most valuable thing, why did Sanatana Goswami put it in the dustbin? Definitely he must be having something more valuable. So he goes back and then he asks Sanatana Goswami, why did you put this in the dustbin? You must be having something more valuable. Then Sanatana Goswami tells him to throw the Parasmani in the river. And then when he comes back, he initiates him into the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So now the question can be raised that Sanatana Goswami obviously knows the principle of Yukta Vairagya, isn't it? Given by his brother Rupa Goswami. So then he could have used the Parasmani. So the Parasmani turns iron into gold. So he could have produced so much of gold. He could have used it in building temples and serving the Lord. So many things he would have done. So then why did he throw the Parasmani in the dustbin? Any thoughts?
He may attach some attachment. Some attachment comes if he build that temple also.
Who's going to get attached?
That he thought, Goswami, that if I build that in that way, so I think it will spoil my bhakti.
That is Sanatana Goswami. He's not an ordinary person.
Prabhuji, his taste for chanting Krishna's names is superior. He felt that is the highest treasure.
Okay, that is fine. But the question is why he could not use the Parasmani for, he could have used it in Krishna's service. Why he did not do that?
Prabhuji, I read in one of the purports that only grihasthas should use the material things for the service of Krishna. Those who are sannyasis and brahmacharis should not be using. They should be renunciation.
Where did you read this?
No, in one of the purports, but I don't know the exact sequence of this one, but I read it recently.
Then why did Prabhupada use it? Prabhupada was sannyasi, right? And Prabhupada is only writing over here.
Prabhuji,
we use all dictaphones, aeroplanes, everything he used in Krishna service.
Yes, Prabhuji. I can't recollect where I read it, but
Prabhuji, the consciousness of a person who's giving charity is also most important.
No, what charity you're talking?
He did not use that money because it didn't come from the right source.
Which money?
Prabhuji, I think you're talking about the Parasmani. The problem.
Yeah, Parasmani.
No, problem might be that it might induce somebody into a greed, because it gives more than what you need, or you can produce more than what you need.
No, but that is Sanatana Goswami. It is with him.
Maybe he wanted to show the world the greatness of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and that is the reason he just threw it in the dustbin.
Okay, so the part of the answer is correct. He wanted to show the world. That is correct. But what he wanted to show the world? The glories of Hare Krishna are known to the world. But besides that, he wanted to show something else.
That whatever we receive from Parasmani is still material and temporary. Ultimately, it is a connection with Supreme Lord that is the highest treasure and goal of human life. So,
Okay.
wanted to show you.
So Srila Prabhupada actually writes in that purport, after telling this whole story, so the verse is talking about Akinchana Gocharam, that Krishna is the property of the impoverished. So after telling the whole story, Srila Prabhupada, he says that, so Sanatana Goswami, he kept the touchstone, the Parasmani in the dustbin, only to set an example for everyone else. Okay, so this was the reason. He wanted to set an example for all the people of this world. So what was the example? The example is that unless one is able to distinguish spirit from matter, one should always be careful to utilize while utilizing material things. So the meaning is that if one is able to see everything in connection to Krishna, then there is no problem. So if one sees everything in connection to Krishna, everything as Krishna's property, then one can use everything in Krishna's service. There's no problem. But if one is not able to see everything in connection to Krishna, then one must make the distinction. This is spirit, this is matter. This is spirit, this is matter. Otherwise, from Krishna's perspective, there is no difference. From Krishna's perspective, everything is spiritual because everything is Krishna's energy. Correct? Everything is Krishna's energy. So from Krishna's perspective, there's nothing material, spiritual. But as long as we don't have that vision, we have to distinguish. This is material, this will entangle me. This is spiritual, this will liberate me. So one has to make that distinction till one comes to that realization. So this is the Siddhanta that Sanatana Goswami wanted to teach the whole world. Therefore, he kept it in the dustbin. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada makes this very important point here, that the acceptance and rejection of things should always be in pursuance of the devotional principles, not that one can independently manufacture some idea of what should be accepted or rejected. The spiritual master as the visible manifestation of Krishna is necessary, therefore, to direct the devotee on behalf of the Supreme Personality of God. So what should be accepted or rejected depends on the person's adhikar, his realization regarding what is spirit and what is matter. So just like, yes, we can use everything in Krishna's service. Mobiles, laptops, money, everything can be used in Krishna's service. But how many devotees get entangled with these things? So when one does not have that correct vision that this is Krishna's, then one tends to use these things for one's own service. So one may think, I will earn a lot of money and use it in Krishna's service. But if one doesn't have that realization, then one ends up using the money for one's own sense enjoyment. So therefore, what should be accepted, what should be rejected, that has to be decided under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master. Otherwise, if one takes these decisions on one's own, then there's every possibility of being diverted from the goal. Because the mind will always trick us. So the mind will say that, yes, very nice, you can use all these things in Krishna's service. But then, because one doesn't have that realization, one ends up using them for one's own service. Okay. So therefore, read the next paragraph.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. The spiritual master must never be carried away by an accumulation of wealth or a large number of followers. A bona fide spiritual master will never become like that. But sometimes, if a spiritual master is not properly authorized and only on his own initiative becomes a spiritual master, he may be carried away by an accumulation of wealth and large number of disciples. His is not a very high grade of devotional service. If a person is carried away by such achievements, then his devotional service becomes slackened. One should therefore strictly adhere to the principles of disciplic succession.
Okay, so that's how even a spiritual master could get carried away.
Yeah.
And these things have happened in the past. So therefore, if one doesn't have that adhikar, if one doesn't have that realization, then one gets attached, one gets polluted by apparent material things, accumulation of wealth, followers. So there is a pastime of how once some disciples showed Srila Prabhupada a photo of a Mayavadi sannyasi. So he has some money in front of him and he has raised his hands. I don't touch money. So that is their Falgu Vairagya. They cannot see the money in connection with Krishna. So when Srila Prabhupada saw the photo, Srila Prabhupada said, okay, now you take a photo of me embracing the money. Give all the money to me, I will use everything in Krishna's service. That's what Srila Prabhupada did. So, but if one doesn't have that adhikar and realization, then one needs to be careful. So whether it's wealth or followers or anything else. So one cannot see that all this belongs to Krishna and must be used for Krishna's service, then there's a likelihood of becoming entanglements. Okay, any clarifications on this? Okay. Fine. If there are no questions, we'll proceed ahead. So somebody can continue reading.
A Krishna conscious person. Next paragraph, Prabhuji.
Yes.
A Krishna conscious person, being naturally purified, has no need of developing any other purificatory process of thought or action. On account of his being highly elevated in Krishna consciousness, he has already acquired all the good qualities and is following the rules and regulations prescribed for the mystic yogic process. Such rules are automatically practiced by the devotees. A concrete example is the quality of non-violence, which is considered a good qualification. A devotee is naturally non-violent and therefore does not have to practice non-violence separately. Some people seek purification by joining a vegetarian movement, but a devotee is automatically a vegetarian. He does not need to practice separately in this matter or to join any society for vegetarians. He is automatically a vegetarian. There are many other instances showing that a devotee need not practice anything but Krishna consciousness. All the good qualities of the demigods automatically develop within him. Those who are intentionally practicing to be vegetarians or to become non-violent may have good qualifications by a material estimation, but these qualifications are not sufficient to make them devotees. A vegetarian is not necessarily a devotee, nor is a non-violent person, but a devotee is automatically both vegetarian and non-violent. We must conclude, therefore, that vegetarianism or non-violence is not the cause of devotion. In this connection, there is a story in the Skanda Purana about a hunter who was converted into a great devotee under the instruction of Narada Muni. When the hunter became a perfect devotee, he was not prepared to kill even an ant. Parvata Muni, a friend of Narada's, saw the wonderful transformation of the hunter by devotional service and remarked, "My dear hunter, your unwillingness to kill even an ant is not very astonishing." Any person who develops the devotional attitude has all the good qualities automatically manifested in his person. A devotee is never a cause of distress to anyone. Srila Rupa Goswami affirms herein that purification of consciousness, purification of bodily activities, austerities, peace of mind, etc. all become automatically manifest in the person who is engaged in devotional service.
Okay, so here his Rupa Goswami is making the point that somebody who becomes Krishna conscious automatically develops the good qualities. So we also discussed this previously when we were discussing Shubhada. So therefore, it is not that the good qualities are a cause of devotional service. So rather, devotional service is a cause of the good qualities. So here's an example of vegetarianism and ahimsa, non-violence. So a devotee automatically develops them. So, but somebody who's a vegetarian need not be a devotee. There are so many vegetarians. Of course, Srila Prabhupada said even the birds are vegetarians. So, vegetarianism is not a cause of devotion, but a devotee automatically becomes a vegetarian. And so therefore, one develops all the good qualities by practicing devotional service. So the good qualities are not the cause of devotion, but devotional service is the cause of all good qualities. And then the last part of the chapter, Rupa Goswami is describing about Navidad Bhakti, the ninefold process of devotional service, and the examples for each of them. Okay, so somebody can read the next two paragraphs.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. There are many other.
Hey, Haribol, wait. Why you keep reading? So many, let others also read.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Yes.
Shri Rupa affirms herein that there are 9 different kinds of devotional service which are listed as hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, worshipping the deity in the temple, praying, carrying out orders, serving Krishna as a friend, and sacrificing everything for him. Each and every one of these processes is so powerful that if anyone follows even one single one of them, he can achieve the desired perfection without fail. For example, if one is attached simply to hearing about the Lord and another is attached to chanting the glories of the name, both will achieve their desired goal in devotional service. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, this has been explained. One may execute 1, 2, 3, or all the different processes of devotional service, and at the ultimate end, he will achieve the desired goal of being established in devotional service. There are concrete examples of how a devotee discharged one of these services and achieved perfection. King Parikshit achieved the desired goal of life simply by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. Sukhdev Goswami achieved the desired goal of life simply by reciting Srimad Bhagavatam. Prahlad Maharaja became successful in his devotional service by always remembering the Lord. Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, was successful by engaging herself in massaging the lotus feet of the Lord. King Prithu became successful by worshipping in the temple. Akrura became successful by offering prayers. Hanuman became successful by rendering personal service to the Lord Ramchandra. Arjuna became successful by being a friend of Krishna. And Bali Maharaja became successful simply by offering all of his possessions to Krishna.
Okay, so these are the ninefold process of devotional service, Navidad Bhakti. And as Srila Prabhupada is mentioning here, one can perform either 1, 2, 3, or any number, and thus attain perfection. And then he's giving examples of how these personalities, they just practiced one of them and achieved perfection. But as far as we are concerned, that is not possible because we don't have that intensity in practice. So just like Parikshit Maharaj, he was hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam 7 days non-stop without eating, drinking, sleeping. So can any one of us do that? No. So we don't have that much intensity to practice any one anga of bhakti so with such intensity. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada has given a balanced program where we engage in different aspects of devotional service, different angas of bhakti. So we have Shravanam, Kirtanam, Archanam, Vandanam. So we practice all of them. So Srila Prabhupada has given us a balanced program where we engage all these different angas of bhakti. And then the last paragraph, Srila Prabhupada is talking of Ambarish Maharaj, who practiced all these 9. So we know how he engaged all his senses in Krishna's service. So he quotes those verses from the Srimad Bhagavatam, the translation. And then Srila Prabhupada writes, the idea is that we should follow in the footsteps of great devotees. If we are unable to execute all the different items of devotional service, we must try to execute at least one of them as exemplified by previous acharyas. If we are engaged in the execution of all the items of devotional service, as was Maharaj Ambarish, the perfection of devotional service is guaranteed from each one of these items. With the first complete engagement, one becomes automatically detached from material contamination and liberation becomes the maid-servant of the devotee. This idea is confirmed by Bilamangal Thakur. If one develops unalloyed devotion to the Lord, liberation will follow the devotee as his maid-servant. Srila Rupa Goswami says that the regulative principles of devotional service are sometimes described by authorities with the path of serving the Lord in opulence. Okay, so that is the end of discussions on Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Any questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned Brahman, Satya, and Jagat Mithya. I have a query over here. So in Bhagavad Gita also, Krishna says that this is like a reflection. This world is a reflection of the spiritual world. So how is it that we can relate to that it is not false when it is saying that it is a mirror image?
So I think so now you should be able to answer that question. In Bhagavad Gita, I'm sure this must have been discussed because there are many verses in the Bhagavad Gita which speak about Mayavad, and Prabhupada refutes Mayavad philosophy in Bhagavad Gita purports. So anyone can answer. How can we refute the Mayavad philosophy of Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya?
Probably we don't, what do you call that? They say that
Can
Maya
somebody
is
a little louder, please?
Yeah, Hare Krishna. Probably this is Lilananda. Probably the point is, Srila Prabhupada says that Brahmavadis, basically Mayavadis, they say that Maya is illusion, right? Material world is also illusion. But what Prabhupada explains is Maya is a Shakti of Supreme Lord, and the material world is also real, but it's temporary. We don't reject the material world. We consider everything as part of Krishna. So,
yes, that's correct. The material world is not false, it's temporary. That's true. But there's another important point. Why the material world is not false? It's a simple logical point, actually.
Why the material world is not?
Because it is. Prabhuji, if Krishna is real, his creation is also real.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Because the material world is coming from the absolute truth. So anything that comes from the absolute truth has to be truth. It cannot be false. So therefore, the material world is not false. It is true, but it is temporary. All right.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so we're going to chapter 15. So now we are beginning Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti. Spontaneous devotional service. So Rupa Goswami first of all defines the word raga. Spontaneous, svarasaki, absorption, paramavishtata. In one's object of love, ishte, is called raga. So it is a spontaneous absorption. So it is not just remembrance or something, but it's a total absorption. Avishtita, avesh, absorption. So that means one is totally absorbed. One just cannot be without thinking of the object of love. But it's spontaneous. Then it's called as raga. So first of all, he defines ragatmika bhakti. What are you seeing on the screen?
Prabhupada's image.
Nobody tells on time.
I was about to tell Prabhuji. I was just identifying whether you have gone ahead or not.
We never know, bro. You read from some other material. Sorry.
Okay, now you can see?
Yes, Prabhu.
Ragatmika Bhakti.
Yes. So this is the definition of ragatmika bhakti. Ishte svarasaki raga paramavishtata bhavet tanmayiya bhavet bhakti satra ragatmikodita. So the definition is, when one becomes attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his natural inclination to love is fully absorbed in the thoughts of the Lord. That is called transcendental attachment, and devotional service according to that attachment is called ragatmika, or spontaneous devotional service. Okay. So all of this is mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Most of this is there in the conversation between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Rai. So if you want, you can refer to these verses in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. We have given you the references. Okay, so Ragatmika Bhakti is when there is full attachment to the Lord. So that's the basic point here. So the attachment is fully absorbed. Okay, so it's fully absorbed in thoughts of the Lord. That is what is called as Ragatmika Bhakti. So this Ragatmika Bhakti is found in the eternal associates of the Lord in Golok Vrindavan. Okay. So you see in Srila Prabhupada's book, so these first few places where it's mentioned Raganuga Bhakti, it's actually Ragatmika Bhakti. So somebody can read the first two paragraphs.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Spontaneous devotional service. Examples of spontaneous devotional service can be easily seen in Krishna's direct associates in Vrindavana. The spontaneous dealings of the residents of Vrindavana in relationship with Krishna are called Raga Nuga. These beings don't have... Sorry.
So this has to be changed to Ragatmika in these initial paragraphs.
Oh, yes. Ragatmika. These beings don't have to learn anything about devotional service. They are already perfect in all regulative principles and have achieved the spontaneous loving service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For example, the cowherd boys who are playing with Krishna do not have to learn by austerities or penances or yogic practice how to play with him. They have passed all tests of regulative principle in their previous lives. And as a result, they are now elevated to the position of direct association with Krishna as a dear friends. Their spontaneous attitude is called Ragatmika Bhakti. Srila Rupa Goswami has defined Ragatmika Bhakti as spontaneous attraction for something while completely absorbed in thoughts in it, with an intense desire of love. Devotional service executed with such feelings of spontaneous love is called Ragatmika Bhakti. Devotional service under the heading of Ragatmika can be further divided into two categories. One category is called sensual attraction and other is called relationship.
Okay, so two types of Ragatmika. Sa Kama Rupa, Sambandha Rupa, Cheti Bhaved Vida. There are two types of Ragatmika Bhakti. That impelled by conjugal feelings, that's called Kama Rupa, which Srila Prabhupada writes as sensual attraction. And that impelled by other relationships, that is Sambandha Rupa. Kama Rupa, Sambandha Rupa. These are the two types of Ragatmika Bhakti. So this very famous Kama Rupa Bhakti appears with brilliance in the women of Braja. They have a particular type of prem which has a special sweetness. It is called Kama by the wise because it is the cause of various amorous actions. So Kama Rupa Ragatmika Bhakti is found in the gopis of Vrindavan. Okay, so especially the eternal associates of the Lord, the Nityasiddha associates. So they have this Ragatmika Bhakti. So just like the Ashtasakis. Then next Sambandha Rupa Ragatmika Bhakti will be discussed. Sambandha Rupa Ragatmika Bhakti is that Bhakti inspired by great absorption arising from identifying oneself as a parent, friend, or servant of Govinda. So the other relationships of Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya. This refers to the Bhakti of the cowherd people, which is indicated by the word Sambandha Vrishnaya. Quote in verse 2 was example of Sambandha. This is because these other relationships in Braja also have a predominance of intense affection, Raga, caused by a lack of awareness of Krishna as God. So the Brajvasis don't know that Krishna is God. Okay, so now let's read from the book. So now further on, Rupa Goswami is explaining that how one can develop attachment to Krishna in 5 different ways. So we had discussed this in our previous discussion also. So you see that now Prabhupada is quoting from the 7th canto, 1st chapter, verse 30, Narad Muni telling Yudhishthira about these different ways one can develop attachment to the Lord. Kama, Bhaya, Dvesha, so all these ways. From being envious of him, out of fear of him, desiring to associate affectionately with him, so all these different ways. And then he speaks about how he gives examples for each of these. Okay, then after that, you can read from the attraction of the gopis.
The attraction of gopis for Krishna. Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Continue, Mataji.
The attraction of the gopis for Krishna and the attraction and the affection of the members of the Yadu dynasty are both accepted as spontaneous or Ragatmika. Can I continue with Ragatmika, Prabhuji, here also?
Yes, yes.
The attraction of Kamsa to Krishna in fear and the attraction of Shishpala in envy are not accepted as devotional service. However, because their attitudes are not favorable, devotional service should be executed only in a favorable frame of mind. Therefore, according to Srila Rupa Goswami, such attractions are not considered to be in devotional service. Again, he analyzes the affection of the Yadus. If it is not on the platform of friendship, then it is spontaneous. If it is on the platform of friendship, then it is spontaneous love. But if it is on the platform of regulatory principle, then it is not. And only when affection comes to the platform of spontaneous love is it counted in the category of pure devotional service. There may be some difficulty in understanding that both the gopis and the Kamsa achieved the same goal. So this point should be clearly understood. Because the attitude of Kamsa and Shishpala were different from that of the gopis. Although in all cases, the focus is on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And all of the devotees are elevated to the spiritual world. There is still a distinction between these two classes of souls. In the first
Okay,
canto of
fine. Okay, so what is the destination of the devotees like the gopis and Kamsa and Shishupal that is being explained? And so first of all, Srila Prabhupada is explaining about the three aspects of the absolute truth, that is Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So he explained that with the example of the sun. So that's something which I'm sure you have discussed in Bhagavad Gita. So you can continue reading after that. The absolute truth and his bodily, the absolute truth and his bodily effulgence are in the same way simultaneously one and different. Then you read from there. Kamsa and Shishupal. You got that?
Second paragraph in between.
Kamsa or Shishupala, Prabhuji?
Yes.
Yes. Kamsa or Shishupala could attain only to the
No,
Kamsa and Shishupala.
Can I read, Prabhu? Kamsa and Shishupala attained to the absolute truth, but they were not allowed to enter into the Goloka Vrindavan abode. Impersonalists and the enemies of the Lord are, because of attraction to God, allowed to enter his kingdom, but they're not allowed to enter into the Vaikuntha planets of the Goloka Vrindavan planet of the Supreme Lord. To enter the kingdom and to enter King's palace are not the same thing. Shall we continue, Prabhu?
Yes.
Srila Rupa Goswami is trying here to describe the different achievements of the impersonalists and the personalists. Generally, those who are impersonalists and are inimical to the Supreme Personality of Godhead get entrance only into the impersonal Brahman. When and if they reach spiritual perfection, the impersonalist philosophers are in one sense like the enemies of the Lord, because the out and out enemies of the Lord and the impersonalists are both allowed to enter only into the impersonal effulgence of the Brahmajyoti. So it is to be understood that they are of similar classification. And actually, the impersonalists are enemies of the God because they cannot tolerate the unparalleled opulence of the Lord. They try always to place themselves on the same level with the Lord. This is due to their envious attitude. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has proclaimed the impersonalists to be offenders of the Lord. The Lord is so kind, however, that even though they are his enemies, they are still allowed to enter into this spiritual kingdom and remain in the impersonal Brahmajyoti, the undifferentiated light of the absolute.
Okay, so Srila Prabhupada is explaining that the demons or the envious people, they are killed by the Lord and they achieve the impersonal Brahmajyoti. And the impersonals also achieve the impersonal Brahmajyoti. So the place that is given to the demons, the enemies of the Lord, is also given to the impersonalists. So that means in which category do the impersonalists come? So they're as good as the enemies of the Lord because they're given the same destination. Okay, that is the impersonal Brahman. So, but the devotees, they actually enter into Vaikuntha. So Srila Prabhupada is giving the example that entering into the kingdom and entering into the king's palace is not the same. Okay, so one may enter into the kingdom, but that doesn't have much significance. But if one enters the king's palace, then that is significant. So similarly, entering the Brahmajyoti is like entering the kingdom, the spiritual kingdom. But that is what the demons who are killed by the Lord and the impersonalists, that is what they achieve. But the devotees, they get entrance into Vaikuntha, which is like the king's palace.
Can you prove?
Okay, so then Prabhupada is explaining about the Brahmajyoti and the spiritual sky. Okay, then you can continue from in the 10th canto.
The 10th canto, 87th chapter, verse 23 of Srimad Bhagavatam, the Vedas personified address the Lord in this way. My dear Lord, yogis meditate upon your localized feature and thus they achieve the spiritual perfection of being merged in the impersonal Brahmajyoti. Persons who treat you as an enemy achieve the same perfection without meditating. The gopis who are embraced by your serpentine hands and who have such lusty attitudes also achieve the same perfection. And as far as we are concerned, being different demigods, being different demigods in charge of different parts of the Vedic knowledge, we are always following the footsteps of the gopis. Thus, we hope to attain the same perfection. By the same perfection, we must always remember the example of the sun and the sunshine. Those who are impersonalists can merge into the sunshine like Brahmajyoti, whereas those who are in love with the Supreme Person enter into the supreme abode of the Lord, Golok Vrindavan.
Continue.
Sorry, Prabhu, continue?
Yes.
Sorry. The lusty attitude of gopis does not refer to any sort of sex indulgence. Srila Rupa Goswami explains that this lusty desire refers to devotees' particular attitude of association with Krishna. Every devotee in his perfectional stage has a spontaneous attraction to the Lord. This attraction is sometimes called the lusty desire of the devotee. The lust in the devotee's excessive desire to serve the Lord in a particular capacity. Such a desire may seem to be a desire for enjoying the Lord, but actually the endeavor is to serve the Lord in that capacity. For example, a devotee may be desiring to associate with the personality of Godhead as his cowherd friend. He will want to serve the Lord by assisting him in controlling the cows in pasturing ground. This may appear to be a desire to enjoy the company of Lord, but actually it is spontaneous love, serving him by assisting in managing the transcendental cows. Hare Krishna.
You can continue to the end.
Sensual attraction. This extreme desire to serve Lord is manifest in the transcendental land of Praja, and it is specifically manifested among the gopis. The gopis' love for Krishna is so elevated that for our understanding, it sometimes explains as being lusty desire. The author of Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kaviraj Krishnadasa, has explained the distinction between lusty desire and the service attitude in this statement. Lusty desire refers to the desire to gratify one's personal senses, and transcendental desire refers to the desire for serving the senses of the Lord. In this material world, there is no such thing as lovers wanting to please the senses of his beloved. Actually, in the material world, everyone wants to mainly to gratify his own personal senses. The gopis, however, wanted nothing at all but to gratify the senses of the Lord. And there is no instance of this in the material world. Therefore, the gopis' aesthetic love for Krishna is sometimes described by scholars as being like the lusty desire of the material world, but actually this should not be taken as a literal fact. It is simply a way of trying to understand the transcendental situation. Hare Krishna, next paragraph. Great devotees up to the standard of Uddhava are very dear friends of Lord, and they desire to follow. They desire to follow the footsteps of the gopis. So the gopis' love for Krishna is certainly not material lusty desire. Otherwise, how could Uddhava aspire to follow in their footsteps? Another instance is Lord Chaitanya himself. After accepting the sannyasa order of life, he was very, very strict about avoiding association with women. But still, he thought that there is no better method of worshipping Krishna than that conceived by the gopis. Thus, the gopis' method of worshipping the Lord as if impelled by lusty desire was praised very highly even by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This very fact means that although the attraction of the gopis for Krishna appears to be lusty, it is not in the least bit material. Unless one is fully situated in the transcendental position, the relationship of gopis with Krishna is very difficult to understand. But because it appears to be just like ordinary dealings of young boys and girls, it is sometimes misinterpreted to be like the ordinary sex of this material world. Unfortunately, persons who cannot understand the transcendental nature of the love affair of gopis and Krishna take it for granted that Krishna's love affairs with gopis are mundane transactions. And therefore, they sometimes indulge in painting licentious pictures in some modernistic style. On the other hand, the lusty desire of Kuja is described by learned scholars as being almost lusty desire. Kuja was a hunchbacked woman who also wanted Krishna with a great aesthetic love, but her desire for Krishna was almost mundane, and so her love cannot be compared to the love of gopis. Her loving affection for Krishna is called Kama Praya, or almost the gopis' love for Krishna.
Okay. So here, Sarup Goswami is explaining about this Kama Rupa Ragatmika Bhakti found in the gopis of Vrindavan. So here, Srila Prabhupada is explaining that this Kama Rupa Bhakti, Prabhupada calls it a sensual attraction. So as Srila Prabhupada is quoting from Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, it describes the difference between love and lust. So what is found in the material world is lust, kama. Atmendriya priti vancha, tare bala kam. So kam means to satisfy one's own senses. But Krishnendriya priti vancha, that is called as prem. So prem or love is satisfying Krishna's senses. But kam means satisfying one's own senses. So Srila Prabhupada writes, in the material world, there is no such thing as a lover's wanting to please the senses of his beloved. Actually, in the material world, everyone wants mainly to gratify his own personal senses. So in the material world, even though it may appear that somebody is serving another person, trying to satisfy the other person, but actually, ultimately, everyone is interested in satisfying one's own senses. So Srila Prabhupada in his lectures, he explains that ultimately, why do people go to work, go to jobs? So do people do jobs to serve the company boss? Why do people go?
To satisfy our material needs.
To earn money, Prabhuji.
Yes, to earn money. And money for what?
To material sense gratification, enjoyment.
Yes, to satisfy oneself, basically. Okay, to satisfy oneself. So that is the purpose of all relationships in this material world. All relationships in this material world are ultimately meant to satisfy oneself. And that is why that's all karma. So so-called love in the material world is actually all lust, karma. And as Prabhupada writes here, there is actually no such thing as love in the material world. Practically, there is no love. It is all lust. Because ultimately, everyone has some selfish motivations in any relationship. And of course, Srila Prabhupada explains that a relationship which somewhat comes close to love, prema, the only example in the material world, which is also not absolute love, somewhat comes close. And that is the relationship between mother and child. Why? Because the mother selflessly serves the child. So child may get up in the middle of the night, cause so much of trouble, inconvenience, but still the mother continues to serve. So that is why that relationship is somewhat close to love, but even that cannot be called as pure love because there could be some motivations even. Ultimately, even a mother, she wants a child because that's pleasing to her. So there is some selfish motivation there. So therefore, actually, there is no such thing as pure love in the material world. Pure love only exists on the spiritual platform. And so that is the love of the gopis. So the gopis, whatever they do at every moment of their lives, is only meant to satisfy Krishna. There is no other purpose. So that is pure love. How to satisfy Krishna? So whether the gopis dress themselves, they decorate themselves with ornaments and flower garlands and sandalwood paste, whatever they're doing, ultimately everything is meant to satisfy Krishna. What will please Krishna? So just like we were hearing one interesting point today in the Bhagavatam class, that when Krishna, he left Mathura, he left Vrindavan to go to Mathura. Akrura came on Kamsa's order and took Krishna and Balram to Mathura. We know the story. And then we know what were the feelings of separation of the gopis and the Brajvasis for Krishna. How they tried to block the chariot, give up their lives and all that. So then the question could be raised that what is the distance between Vrindavan and Mathura?
Few kilometers.
Huh?
Just few kilometers, about 20 kilometers.
Yeah, some 15, 20 kilometers. Now, they were not able to live without Krishna. Now, what was the difficulty in going some 15, 20 kilometers and meeting Krishna? And they are literally about to give up their lives in separation from Krishna. Why they could not walk those, walk or go on bullock carts or whatever? They could have gone that much distance. No, it was not too far. Any idea?
Probably they're just not thinking anything in separation.
What? They're not just?
Probably because of the separation, they're more worried about just the separation part and not thinking of other logical these things.
No, okay, they're feeling separation, then go and meet. No, what is the problem?
It's not just meeting, but it's more about serving him and being there with him all the time in the place.
Okay, so they could have gone to Mathura and been with Krishna.
If Krishna goes to Mathura, he'll be in Aishwarya, Prabhuji, like.
Okay, so what? Okay, there's some Aishwarya Bhav there, but they can meet, no? So this is the meaning of pure love. So pure love means they were thinking Krishna has left us to go to Mathura. Will Krishna be happy if we go and meet him? Okay, we may be happy by meeting Krishna, but will Krishna be happy to meet us? That was their question. What if Krishna is displeased that we came from Vrindavan to Mathura? They could not bear the thought of displeasing Krishna. They were ready to suffer those pangs of separation. Of course, that is not actually suffering. On the transcendental platform, everything is bliss. But in any case, so they were ready to go through those feelings of separation rather than displease Krishna. That is pure love. Pure love means only one thought. There is nothing about ourselves. There is nothing about myself. So, okay, my meeting Krishna may please me, but will that please Krishna? That is love. So many of the times we think that I practice devotional service so that I become happy. That is mostly our conception of devotional service. But on the platform of pure love, there is no question of what I feel and I don't feel. There is only one factor which decides what one does and what one does not do. And that is what will please Krishna. So,
Prabhuji, I have a question. Prabhuji, I have a question. If it's okay to ask.
Go ahead.
Prabhuji, what made them feel, what Leela made them feel that Krishna would not be pleased?
A little louder, please. Can't hear.
Yeah, sorry. What Leela of Krishna made them feel that Krishna would not be pleased if they go to meet him?
So see, that is a doubt. That is a doubt because they don't know. So the doubt, what if Krishna is displeased? Because Krishna never invited them. Did Krishna ever invite them?
No. Krishna did not invite Prabhu, but he also, when he left, he told that he will
he told, I will come back. Correct? He told, I will return very soon. But he never told them to come and meet him. Correct?
Yes, Prabhuji.
So he never invited them. He said he will come back.
But Prabhuji, I mean, they're all transcendental leelas, I know cannot ask too many questions there, but just that, Uddhava also came and met. Balramji also came and met the Vrajavasis.
Yes. So they came and met.
Yeah, and they told Vrajavasis, if I'm right, I'm not able to exactly recollect, Radhanath Maharaj's lecture, but it was like, Krishna is also desperate to meet you.
Yes, that is all fine.
So why would
that is all fine? So Krishna is desperate to meet, that is fine. But he never invited them. Did he invite them? That is the question. Actually, Krishna wanted, now this is, of course, we're getting into a little quite high transcendental subject matters. But anyway, since you raised the point, I'm just making the point. So actually, Krishna wanted them to experience the highest feelings of love in separation. Okay, so therefore, Krishna purposefully, he kept that distance because he wanted them to experience those feelings of separation. But anyways, the point that we're trying to make is that this is love. So love means simply satisfying the beloved. So there is no conception of what will satisfy me, but the only conception is what will satisfy Krishna. So that is the meaning of pure love. And we know the famous story which Srila Prabhupada also tells about Krishna having a headache. I'm sure most of us know that story. So when Krishna had a headache, then Narad Muni went to him and said, okay, so how can we relieve you of the headache? He said, you get the dust from the lotus feet of the devotees. And so Narad Muni goes to so many sages and rishis. And they said, oh, how can we give the dust of a lotus feet to put on Krishna's head? We will go to hell for that. But when they came to the gopis, they said, no problem. So Narad Muni had to tell them, don't you know? If you do this, you'll go to hell. What did the gopis reply? For relieving Krishna's headache for even a moment, we are ready to go to hell for eternity. Again, the same point. There is no conception of my pleasure and displeasure. The only point of consideration is what will please Krishna. This is pure love. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada writes, pure love does not exist in the material world. Because in the material world, everything we do is tainted with the conception, what will please me? So even when we practice devotional service, most of the times we're thinking, what will please me? Of course, there's some conception is also there as to what will please Krishna. And then that's basically what makes the difference in level of advancement. how much one is thinking about oneself and how much one is thinking of Krishna. So just like we find in the life of Srila Prabhupada, so much of struggle at that age. Why? He was not thinking about himself. He was only thinking of what will please Guru and Krishna. So that is pure love. And that is what the gopis had. And that is why Srila Prabhupada is given examples like great personalities like Uddhav. Uddhav, he wanted to become Gulmalata, a blade of grass in Vrindavan, so that he can get the dust of the lotus feet of the gopis on his head. That is how even Uddhav, he considered the gopis as worshipable. And then even Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was the strictest of the sannyasis, but still, Ramya Kachadupasana Vrajavadu Vargena Vakalpita. So he is also glorifying the devotional service of the gopis as the topmost form of devotional service that exists in creation. So that is the devotional service of the gopis, Kama Rupa Ragatmika Bhakti. And so therefore, only for our understanding, sometimes this devotional service of the gopis is called as the lusty attitude, or such words are used sometimes, because just for our understanding, because we don't have a conception of pure love. So for our understanding, for us to get some understanding, sometimes those words are used. But we should understand that it's totally pure love. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami also gives the example that just like Kama and Prema have been compared to iron and gold. So though both of them are metals, but still gulf of difference. We all know that, the prices of iron and gold. So similarly, Kama and Prema may appear to be similar. Some loving affairs between boys and girls, but still there's a gulf of difference, like iron and gold. So therefore, one must properly understand the Siddhanta. But unfortunately, as Prabhupada has mentioned, so many sahajiyas and people, they don't understand. They very cheaply speak about these loving affairs of Radha and Krishna and the gopis. But Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, therefore we see, has never spoken about these loving affairs in public. So only with his very intimate associates he would discuss. And same thing applies to Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas. But unfortunately, the professional reciters, as Srila Prabhupada said, would directly jump to the Ras Leela and these topics just to attract the attention of mundane people. And then finally, he speaks about Kubja. So we almost have heard the pastime of Kubja. So her love was almost mundane. And so therefore, it is called as Kama Praya. Definitely, there was some love, but there was some mundane attraction also. And then chapter 16, spontaneous devotion further described. Then there he describes relationship. That means Sambandha Rupa Ragatmika Bhakti. So somebody can read that. And read that.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Chapter 16, spontaneous devotion further described relationship. In the attitude of the denizens of Vrindavana, such as Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda, it is to be found the ideal transcendental concept of being the father and mother of Krishna, the original personality of Godhead. Factually, no one can become the father or mother of Krishna, but a devotee's possession of such transcendental feelings is called love of Krishna in a parental relationship. The Vrishnis, Krishna's relatives at Dwarka, also felt like that. So spontaneous love of Krishna in the parental relationship is found both among those denizens of Dwarka who belonged to the dynasty of Vrishni and among the inhabitants of Vrindavana. Spontaneous love of Krishna as exhibited by the Vrishnis and the denizens of Vrindavana is eternally existing in them. In the stage of devotional service where regulative principles are followed, there is no necessity of discussing this love, for it must develop of itself at a more advanced stage.
Okay, so as far as this Ragatmika Bhakti is concerned, as Prabhupada is writing, spontaneous love of Krishna is eternally existing in them. Okay, so these are the eternal, Nitya Siddha associates of the Lord. Okay, so these Ragatmika Bhaktas, they are Nitya Siddha associates of the Lord. Nobody can take their position. They are eternal. So nobody can take the position of Nanda Maharaj, Yashoda in Vatsalya Ras, or in Sakya Ras, there are the eternal friends of Krishna like Shridhama, Sudhama. Nobody can take their position. No jiva after perfection can take their position. And similarly, the gopis, the Ashtasakis, so these are eternal. So as mentioned over the love is eternally existing in them. Nobody else can take their position. So that is the meaning of Ragatmika Bhakti. So in the next class, we will continue with Raga Nuga Bhakti. Okay, fine. So we'll end at this point.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Yeah, Prabhuji, just for planning purposes, Prabhuji, how many more sessions do you think we have, Prabhuji?
Okay, so so at least my plan is, so today we finished the 15th chapter. That means we have 4 more chapters. And so my plan is to take two chapters requiring two more classes. 16, 17, and 18, 19. So two classes. If for whatever reason, if it gets a little extended, then maximum 3.
So most probably next week we'll be finishing that means.
Yes.
Okay. Accordingly, we'll plan the closed book exam also. That's why I wanted to.
Yes. So next week we'll definitely finish.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu ki jai, Shri Rupa Samved Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram.
Thank you, Vikram.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you.